Well, it is 5:30 and we'll go ahead and get started. And so this evening, just want to welcome everyone for coming to our second meeting of the New Bern Bicycle and Pedestrian Safety, the New Bern Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. And I know we've got all of our board members here, and I think you know most of staff. We have definitely some citizens participating, so welcome. So we look forward to having a robust conversation this evening. As you can see from our agenda, we're going to start off with public comment. I will point out that our office did receive 2 emails from the citizens specifically about this committee. There are copies of which are attached in each of your packets. So we received 2 emails, and I'm going to just paraphrase them in effort of time. And we will be discussing some of these emails, the contents of the emails as part of tonight's conversation. So the first email is from Ms. Stout. She had some questions regarding specifically Greenbrier and the safety concerns about having sidewalks in that area. She's also interested in us considering the triangle, which she defines as the New Bern City, which I'm thinking is more downtown, Trent Road, Glen Burnie Road, and Noose Boulevard, and then back to downtown. And we will talk about some of these areas have already been identified for pedestrian improvements. She's also interested in having access to Martin Marietta Park, safe routes to schools and parks, addressing the safety and concerns on Noose Boulevard about having a sidewalk or a path. And then lastly, the second to last is adding crosswalks, such as crosswalks, push buttons for pedestrians, etc., and having someone talk about Emerald Isles Trail, which we'll be talking about as well. And so the other email we received was from Mr. Brett Schneider, and he was talking about one of the areas in our plan, which is one of the 6 E's, which is education. And he is interested in seeing if the committee is interested in doing some type of safety campaign. And he talked about the difference between ignorance and arrogance. And said that it would be nice for us to have the marked cycling lanes in the county. And this is sometimes seen by having wide paved shoulders, which is also something that, although it's outside of the city of New Bern, it is something that the MPO has identified on some highway projects that we have recently submitted for NCDOT prioritization. So I just wanted to present those to you, and we can address those in a little bit more detail. But with that, I would open it up to any of the public who would like a few minutes to voice any concerns.
Are you asking for the public?
Yes, if you would, this is your opportunity.
Okay. So I know they got rails trails, and behind Kings Road, I used to live there when I was a kid. The train used to come back behind there, and I think that would be a perfect spot to put a rails to trails right in there. Just you got shopping there, you've got New Bern High School's right down the street, and stuff like that. And we desperately need bike lanes in this town and sidewalks that actually connect instead of the way they are. They don't connect to anything. They're just like the new business has to put a sidewalk in, but the older business has been grandfathered in. So those are my 2 biggest things: bike lanes, because it would get more people active if they knew that they could do it safely in this town. So,
and for our minutes, I guess, can you give us your name?
My name is Ben Lindemann. It's Lindemann.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I'm Dave Sweck. One of the things I attended the first meeting. One of the things I noticed, and I mentioned with Ben, there's no bike rack out in front. And it's 2 months later. There's still no bike rack. Now, I didn't ride my bike tonight, but you know, just little things like that. that I'd like to see more of that type of thing around the town.
Okay.
And I also agree with Ben about connected sidewalks. I happened to see a woman in a power wheelchair on a sidewalk, and she went up Nelson, it ended, so she had to go back and literally was on Martin, she ended up riding on Martin Luther King Boulevard in her wheelchair down Martin Luther King Boulevard. And I thought, it's a little bit dangerous. So,
Could I make one public comment? First of all, Matt Blythe is not easily impressed on a darn thing, especially when it comes to bicycles. And he has commended the city of New Bern on this plan. And that's unusual. So do I. This is an excellent bicycle plan that has covered way more in detail than I could absorb in a month and a half or 2 months. I believe you said this plan can be had online, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
How would somebody get to it?
It is on the Development Services website. And there's a link that says the New Bern Bike and Pedestrian Plan. And we can certainly share that link if you want to leave your email address. I can email that to you directly after the meeting.
I tried it on my phone, it didn't work, so I figured, well, it's just my phone. I hadn't tried it on the computer.
And it's on the MPO's website as well.
And page 49 lists 5 different things that we were told to kind of look at. And some of the stuff that you're talking about, like Dot and Martin Luther King and whatnot, has been covered in that. I'm not trying to steal y'all's time, but I'm just saying, this is an excellent plan, take a look at it. Then you can come back and say, this is what I would like to see happen. And maybe that will give us some clarity.
My name is Bethany Richards. This is my first meeting, so I appreciate you guys assembling and trying to make New Bern better with biking and walking paths. I don't know if y'all have thought about approaching the police department with bicyclists that are maybe riding in the wrong direction and they actually don't know the rules. So maybe that's something that's been discussed, and maybe the police department can be involved in stopping bicyclists and informing them that they're riding incorrectly against traffic when they should be riding with traffic, because it makes the rest of us bicyclists that are following the rules, it's aggravating all the people that are driving the cars. So I didn't know if there was a way that we could actively work with the police department and maybe them stopping people that are bicycling incorrectly or unlawfully, and maybe getting some of these folks before they get hit or before somebody driving a car kills somebody. Maybe we can get some of these folks to actually abide by the bicycling rules.
You still open for public comments?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, that's going to
It's
fall
here
under
with
the
the chair,
education
so I'm
thing
gonna
running into.
Suzanne Blaze, I've been having some email correspondence with Mr. Brinson. I live in Greenbrier also, so I'm going to kind of piggyback on Linda's email that you spoke of. We've had some emails going back and forth, and I'm concerned in Greenbrier for many of the same reasons that's being expressed here. And also, I think everybody seems to have, not everybody, but many people seem to have their own assumption or ideas what the laws are for vehicles, for pedestrians, and for cyclists. And I tried to find a website with some of those on there, and what I did find was very vague in Chapter 20 of this was the pedestrians' rights and duties, and it went on with the right-of-way for pedestrians, for vehicles, and bicyclists. And we know bicyclists basically follow the same rules as a vehicle. But most of it alluded to the fact that if there's crosswalks, what to do, or if there was some kind of a signal. But we have none of that in Greenbrier. And many of you that ride, you know that we have a lot of organized bike clubs and the MS ride that goes through there, but we don't have any bike path or anything. There's a lot of walkers that live in Greenbrier. They may not drive down, ride downtown or such, but they do. We have quite a few avid cyclists right in Greenbrier, and there's been a lot of known speeding, not just residents, and distracted drivers. In fact, I just heard about, just happened just the other day, where there was a distracted driver in Greenbrier that hit into one of the yard waste trucks. Now that's pretty distracting. We had one that ran into, we have a Emerald Golf Club sign right off of Greenbrier Parkway that a resident plowed into it. And right months before that, or maybe a year before that, the big sign up on the median, as you come into the main entrance of Greenbrier, somebody veered off and hit that. So we have and it's a number of reasons why these things happen. It could be medical, but regardless of the reason, it's still a dangerous situation for not only the drivers, but for cyclists, and especially walkers and dog walkers. And I was under the impression that vehicles were supposed to yield, because you can't yield to the right of way unless there's a crosswalk. You can't have crosswalks, as I learned, unless there's sidewalks. So I'm here to kind of advocate for Greenbrier to try to get sidewalks put in so we can have crosswalks, and therefore some safety, or bike routes, bike lanes, as was indicated by a few people here, to try to cut down and just open the doors for safety. And there has been more traffic control in there as of recently, because we've had some other situations in Greenbrier that many may not be aware of. So anyway, I'm just here, and thank you, Bob, for inviting me here, and hope that we can see something happen in that regard for our community, because again, they are city streets over there. So that's about all I'm going to say. It's something that I've been kind of trying to address for about 10 years, but this is the first time I brought it to a venue like this. And a lot of the people in Greenbrier, well, many of them seem to think that there's not a problem, but apparently these people are also people that don't ride bikes or don't walk, so they don't really know. So that's it. Thank you for your time, and we hope to see something.
Some of your issues that have been addressed in this plan?
Excuse me?
Some of your issues have been addressed in this plan?
Yes.
Hi, my name is Emily Zucker. I also live in Greenbrier, and I'm a big advocate of walking trails, sidewalks, bicycle paths. I lived in Emerald Isle for 20 years, and I was there when the idea came about to create the path down Coast Guard Road, as well as the one that extends the whole length of the town. It has changed things dramatically and for the better, because I remember going there on vacation years and years ago, and I was a runner, and so was my brother, so was my husband, so are the kids. We ran in the street, which is what people do now here. They do it in Greenbrier and they do it on other streets. It's dangerous. It's very hard to share the road with cars going both ways. So the bike path and the pedestrian path and bike path changed everything. And what they did was they connected things. They connected neighborhoods. They connected retail establishments, which is what I think a lot of businessmen and the retail establishments along Glenburnie, as well as up and down Martin Luther King Boulevard, would be interested in having people be able to walk from one establishment to the next, and really encourage the industry and spending time there. So, and as far as that's concerned, getting across Martin Luther King Boulevard to the mall there where Harris Teeter is, where so many people go, but they drive their cars. If you could walk there on a nice day, people will do it. And there are younger and younger people who are even moving into Greenbrier, believe it or not. And I know that, that would be something everyone would encourage, and I would be happy to talk more about the Emerald Isle bike path, because we were there when it started. And they started by contacting the businesses and saying, how would this work for you? So it would work for everybody. Thank you.
Anyone else? All right, well, thank you everyone for providing that feedback. And we will be discussing some of those concerns in ideas tonight. But there's also opportunity for us to have some more conversation outside of this conversation. As the MPO, which is the Metropolitan Planning Organization, we're responsible for identifying all modes of transportation and looking at it from the long term. And so we're going to talk about some of that tonight when we talk about complete streets. We're also going to talk about the Emerald Isle Trail. So it's great that you're here, that you can offer some firsthand knowledge on that. All right, so we've talked about the idea of what complete streets is, and it is mentioned in. Oh, yeah, sorry. Jesse pointed out. It's not on the agenda, but we do have minutes. Sorry, I skipped right ahead. I was super excited to get started. So we have minutes from our first organizational meeting, and we would be looking for a motion.
So moved.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second? Thank you. And all those in favor? If there's any opposed? Okay, now we can officially move on. Thank you, Jessica. So we've been talking about complete streets, and it's mentioned in the bike and pedestrian plan. But sometimes we kind of need to put a formal definition to the concept that we keep talking about complete streets. And really the idea of complete streets is centered around that you want to design a facility, and in this case we're talking about a road that includes accommodations for everybody. So we have a road, we're looking at a sidewalk, we're looking at a trail, and we're not looking at it as one having priority over the other. It's how do they all coexist. So the definition is where you have a transportation policy and design approach that requires streets to be planned, designed, operated, and maintained to enable safe, convenient, and comfortable travel and access for all users of all ages and abilities, regardless of their mode of transportation. So you're creating all modes equal, not maybe your car higher than your pedestrian or your cyclist. So there's lots of benefits of complete streets, some of which we've already talked about this evening, but it's an alternative mode of transportation. It allows easier access for people to get from one place to the next. It builds a more sustainable community because you are providing that connectivity between neighborhoods, your economic and employment centers, your transit systems, and it improves the safety for your pedestrian, cyclists, as well as your motorists. So I think it's interesting because we talk about complete streets, but now it's, well, what do we do with that concept? How do we actually get it to be applied for here in New Bern? And to really think about it as three different areas. So we have the implementation, which is seen here in the New Bern Development Services. So this is where you have a new business that comes to town, or a business that maybe wants to change its use, and it's required them to do a little bit more than what is a typical upfit. And so this new development or potential redevelopment would come in, and this is the code of ordinance or your land use that says what you have to do in order to get a certificate of occupancy. You're looking at your zoning, etc. Then you also have just pedestrian improvements that our New Bern Engineering Department will look at. So this is where they have money through a grant or through Powell bill funds, etc., that they're looking to install or modify a sidewalk, a trail, curb ramps, etc. And then most importantly, probably the bigger impact is your transportation focus. And this is when you look at the requirements of NCDOT, and that really comes down to when thinking about where we want pedestrian and cycling improvements, and to focus it when you're looking at a new roadway facility. And then you also have the opportunity to do standalone bicycle and pedestrian improvements. And that's what Felicia and I do with the New Bern area MPO. And the city of New Bern is a member of that organization. So when we talk about implementation and development services, so they are currently working on or getting ready to start updating the land use ordinance. So the RFQ, or the request for qualifications to hire a consultant, is expected to be due sometime soon, but they're hoping to get started early of 2024. Now, this is a really in-depth process where they're going to look through the entire code and update it. So it's going to take about 2 years to do this process. But that also presents an excellent opportunity to implement a complete streets policy. This is the ability for us to influence now what we would like to see with that future development. And this allows us to do bicycle pedestrian-oriented design and implementation. So, we talked about the sidewalks to nowhere. Well, you have to start somewhere. I know it's not ideal, but this allows the opportunity for new development as it comes in, that new development pays for that sidewalk rather than the taxpayers or the city of New Bern paying for that improvement. And so I'm going to let George talk about 3 projects that his department is currently working on to see some improvements happen soon.
Right, so in these 2 projects, the Lowe's Boulevard and the Trent Road project, will probably be kicking off probably in the spring of this year. We've got some materials that we're lining up to order pre-construction phase. But we identified an area along Lowe's Boulevard where we had a considerable amount of foot traffic. It was one coming from the multifamily units to the north, where they've actually built a second set of those on the north side of Lowe's Boulevard, and then also from the Southgate community. So we had the opportunity to connect what's an existing dead-end road to a pedestrian crossing. So we're going to have a mid-block crossing there with a safe harbor island in the turn lane. So it'll be raised curbing for pedestrian crossing. And there will be push-button flashing signals there for you to cross in that signal. So we're going to be connecting basically 2 residential areas to a sidewalk to a retail facility. It was kind of easy to identify this one by the worn grass behind the curb line. Very easy way to identify where people or pedestrians are walking. The second project, if you have the aerial on Trent Road, we are going to connect right now. We have existing sidewalk in front of a business or retail center where Prelec exists, and we're going to connect there and run down across, we're going to across one stream with a pedestrian bridge, and we're going to put another crossing to the north side, which will connect to the existing sidewalks of New Bern Marketplace. So that will then connect the head of one residential. So we're trying to work our way down the road. We can't do it all at one time. But that crossing will also have a new set of pedestrian controls and a safe harbor island in the middle with raised curbing to protect the residents in that area. And so that to the right is the safe harbor island where you'll be able to get where you'll have more than just a white stripe line or a yellow line to protect you from a vehicle.
And that's more barbecue.
Yeah, it'll tie you to the backside of Moore's Barbecue. That's exactly right. And then there's one small section further down that we're going to continue on to Glen Burnie, right in front of the Craven County School Board office. So we're going to connect that to Glen Burnie. So, we hear what y'all are saying of trying to connect, and that's what we're trying to do. We're facilitating some infill to get people from one place to another.
I don't know if it's the right time to bring this up or not, but since we're on Trent Road, when are they going to repave Trent Road? And the reason I'm saying that, are they ever going to make it 3 lanes all the way down with a turn lane in the middle?
I know we have.
Or it's going to be in and out. That's dangerous for bicycles.
Yeah, we
Very
still have a couple sections that are narrow, and we are, that would be in future plans to resurface or widen any of those sections.
No, that's the DOT road, right?
That's the city of New Bern. City of New Bern accepted it from DOT several years ago.
Oh, okay.
And this is an additional project that we'll probably start construction on this in the coming month. This is going to be a raised pedestrian access to the backside of Henderson Park off of an area where there's Sutton and Garden Street. There's a difficult curve there. We're evaluating how to get around that 90-degree curve to get up to Garden. There again, trying to connect the new Stanley White Rec Center to the residential areas to the north of that property. And, you know, we hear what y'all say, and I totally agree that connections to retail, to our parks, and to the schools, once you connect those, you basically encompass, you touch most of the residential communities to then be able to access it. You may not have the sidewalk right from your community to the primary sidewalk, but if we can get some infrastructure rings in, you know, that's kind of a goal to get it. If we can get you there out of your neighborhood, then you have access. So that's kind of in our planning stages, but these are 3 that are upcoming that you'll see constructed between now and the end of spring next year.
Great, so now that we've talked about what the city of New Bern is currently working on, there's opportunity to look at NCDOT complete streets. So NCDOT has its own policy, and the policy is pretty robust. So it allows you to look at it from a planning. So you start off in where do you envision for that facility or that improvement. But that need has to be identified as a need, not just a want, but then also needs to be in a plan. And then once it's in a plan, it moves through project development where it gets picked up for funding, and they do another evaluation where it has criteria to say, is it something that will either help or hinder the project? And actually, funding is not necessarily one of those criteria, interestingly enough. But you're also looking at those improvements when you're looking at a larger project, looking at a bridge, and they're also now looking at it when you do resurfacing. So we talked about DOT is supposed to be getting with the city of New Bern when they're looking at resurfacing roads, or the county, and looking at the opportunity to do different striping or adding some paved shoulders if there's enough right-of-way and signage, etc. And then, but there is a cost share, but interesting, if it's in a plan, NCDOT will pay the full cost of that implementation. But it has to be in a plan, and the need has to be identified. And so that's where you ask, well, what does that really mean? So for complete streets, NCDOT has several different what they call facility types. So a pedestrian facility is a sidewalk, typically. The on-road bicycle facility is possibly either striped back bike lanes or wide paved shoulder. So you typically have the width of your road, the lane that you drive in, and then you have the white line, and then you have another 4 feet. So it's supposed to give some protection for your cyclists. You have the shared use path, also known as a multi-use path. That is typically outside of the roadway facility, and there's typically about 3 to 4 feet separating the two. You have the separated bicycle facility, which is like a shared use path, it's just separated and smaller. The multi-use path or shared use path is typically 10 feet in width. And then you have the greenway crossing, which is doesn't run parallel to the road, it just kind of traverses around, outside of NCDOT's right of way. So you can look at it, if it's in a plan, which is important, NCDOT pays the full cost. That's our ultimate goal. We want to put all that cost on NCDOT so that it's not something that taxpayers locally or any city has to pay for. If it's not in a plan, but the needs identified, there's still an opportunity. You can see here where there's a cost share opportunity. And then a betterment is something such as NCDOT is working on an intersection improvement project, and they're putting in push buttons and curb ramps, but we need a little bit of sidewalk. The city can ask them to do that sidewalk for us, and that's a betterment. That's we would like to have, and then that betterment cost is something that the city would pay for, but it's typically a percentage. It's not necessarily the whole cost. There's some wiggle room in there within CDOT. So when we talk about that it's a need, but not in a plan, that the cost share is based on population. And so for the city of New Bern, we would be between the 10 and 50,000. So our local share is only 10% of that cost. So that's much better than paying 20%, much better than paying 100% of the cost. But again, it's the importance of putting it in a plan. So that this bicycle and pedestrian plan is one of those plans that's a qualifying plan. So it has to be in a plan. and the need has to be there. And then once it gets to NCDOT where they're looking at the possibility of putting it as part of their highway project, they look at it, they say, is it in a plan? So they're looking at, does this make sense? DOT is not going to construct a sidewalk to nowhere. If it's in a plan and maybe DOT is going to construct part of it, and then maybe New Bern's going to come back and construct a part of it, so that eventually there'll be connectivity, they're willing to sign off on that. So they're looking at, does your recommendation, is it valid? Does it make sense? Then they're asking, is there a demand? And so, as George mentioned, is there a goat path? Is there employment centers? It has to be more than we want it. DOT likes to see a little bit more than that. So those are opportunities where we can capture some of that data when we're analyzing new development. And then, so we're also looking at like the future land use. So then, what type of facility is being recommended? So in this case, are we looking for, is the need a sidewalk where it's more pedestrian, or is the need more for cycling where we're looking at wide paved shoulders or multi-use path? So this would be a good example with that would be in the county. So in North Carolina, counties do not maintain sidewalks. So when you have an area in the county that they're interested in pedestrian accommodations, we typically request DOT to do wide paved shoulders so that you can get the protection for your cyclists, but you're not necessarily looking for a sidewalk because it'll never get funded. A county just doesn't do that. And so part of the Complete Streets policy, DOT is trying to figure out what does that really mean. If we're gonna say we're complete streets and we're leveraging all of our users equally, how do we construct sidewalks in a county? They don't have the answer for that yet, and I'm not sure they will for a number of years, but they are actively trying to answer that question. So then also they ask when they're looking at the evaluation methodology is what is the environmental risk and the schedule impact? So if we were going to add this facility, what's the impact to the highway project? Because ultimately that's the number one priority for them. And I haven't really seen that be much of a conversation stopper because they're looking at this at the very beginning of a project, not at the end of a project. And then they look at the financial analysis. What is the cost? What is the impact? Do I have to get additional right-of-way? And so you kind of have to do a little bit of bartering that maybe we started off with the multi-use path, but that's not really going to work because the right-of-way is going to be too much and that's going to delay the project, but we really still want that accommodation. Maybe we look at a buffered bike lane, which is still connected to the road. You're not looking for additional 14 feet of right-of-way. Maybe you're only looking for 4. So those are all things as part of the evaluation for Complete Streets for NCDOT. And as I mentioned, the New Bern Bicycle and Pedestrian Plan is an approved plan, but the MPO also has the Craven County Comprehensive Transportation Plan and the MPO's long-range plan, which is called the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. So both of those plans have a bike and ped element, again, because we look at all modes of transportation. So with that being said, and I mentioned as the MPO, we had just submitted some project for what's called prioritization. So NCDOT has a process every 2 years where we get the opportunity to evaluate projects for potential funding, scoring and funding. And so I want to just provide a list of these are projects that were identified in one of those plans I just mentioned. So we're looking at installing a sidewalk on Glen Burnie, the MLK Boulevard, which was the mall side of MLK, that we're looking at a sidewalk on both sides. And that particular project has been put in several different ways to get funded. So we're looking at it as a part of a highway project where we would improve the road and include sidewalks. And we also included it as different sections of sidewalks. So we put that project in about 4 different ways. We're also looking at Lowe's Boulevard, a multi-use path, Hotel Drive as a buffered bike lane, and both of those recommendations came from the bike and pedestrian plan that was recently approved. Then we're looking at a multi-use path on Academic Drive, a shared use path on McCarthy, and sidewalk on News Boulevard. Now, I will point out that work has already begun preliminary on News Boulevard. So News Boulevard, as we know, has lots of safety concerns. So NCDOT has started and completed a feasibility study. So feasibility study is looking at how feasible is it to make the roadway improvements along with other pedestrian improvements that are being requested. So on News Boulevard, we're looking at constructing a sidewalk on one side and a multi-use path on the other. And this was looking at, in essence, from Bosch Boulevard all the way to MLK. So this project is a little bit more than lines in a piece of paper. They identified the right-of-way, they identified where the path is for both the sidewalk and the multi-use. But that project is currently not funded. It's just a project that we evaluated. The MPO did submit that project again as part of the highway prioritization. So we'll know more about how those projects shake out first part of next year. I will also point out that NCDOT is working on a pedestrian and cyclist vulnerable user study for News Boulevard. And basically that they've identified that section has lots of crash histories. And they're trying to figure out what can we do to make it a little bit safer. So Felicia and I, a couple weeks ago, we walked entire News Boulevard from those same limits, from Racetrack all the way to actually downtown and to Queen. And they took notes. We saw people walking, we saw cyclists, and it was great because we got to document that, the real need of where people are coming and where they're going.
I'm glad you guys did that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Can I just make an interjection, just for those of you that don't know, Glen Burnie Road, MLK Boulevard, and News Boulevard are all owned by NCDOT. They're not owned by the city of New York. And so that's why when Deanna talks about DOT and having to get approval from them, and their studies and that sort of thing, that's because the city of New York doesn't own those 3 streets. And I wanted to make sure that that was clear. So out of these projects, the Glen Burnie Road, McCarthy Boulevard, News Boulevard, that's NCDOT. The rest of them are ones we submitted, but it's probably going to fall back on the city of New Bern to do those because those are city of New Bern streets. So not all the streets in the city of New Bern are owned by the city. And so sometimes when you make complaints or say something about, may want improvements on certain ones of these streets, we've got to go to NCDOT to get those things done. For the Greenbrier residents, lowering the speed limit to 35 on Glen Burnie, the city had to go to NCDOT to make that happen because we don't own the street. So I just wanted to be clear on that. And all of that is in the plan. Thank you, Tim.
All right, so before we start on the Emerald Isle Trail, is there any other questions about some of the projects that we talked about? And I know some of you may have had an opportunity to review. Any questions on Complete Streets?
Sorry, I came in a little bit late. This may fall out of the scope of the county, but just to sort of come up to speed a little bit, where would any improvements or developments fall in responsibility with regards to between here and Cherry Point, more specifically between Catfish Lake Road and Cherry Point?
So that would be part of the conversation with the MPO.
Okay.
So I can talk to you after the meeting if you like.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you.
And your name, sir?
Russell Clark.
Deanna?
Yes.
You said that it needs to be a plan in place. How does one initiate, how does that get initiated? How does a plan?
Well, I'm so glad that you asked that question. So the New Bern area MPO will be updating our long-range plan. We're going to start that initiative probably July of next year, if not sooner. And so if you will please give us your name and email, we will gladly invite you to those meetings. But we're gonna be taking feedback, because we look at, our area is more than just New Bern. So we're looking at the whole urbanized area. And so large part of what we do is looking and seeking public input.
Okay, because on the scale of things, what I'm seeing, and I agree that those are important things for anybody that's going to be doing some major cycling around the town. But in Greenbrier, it looks like that would take a far back seat to get sidewalks. Or now that I see that you all also talk about a shared use path, which I don't know how that would work with the laws and right-of-ways to vehicles and things of that sort.
So to your question, the easiest thing is so the projects that we submitted here, those all came from a plan, and those projects were discussed with our boards, which is the technical coordinating committee, and then our advisory board, which is the transportation advisory board. So those are the two boards that oversee the MPO. So the first thing we need to do is we need to get it in a plan as identified need and the why. And then as we go through the next round of prioritization, which it's every 2 years, then there will be your opportunity to advocate for bringing that section of sidewalk as a potential project to submit for prioritization. Because once we submit it, that doesn't mean it gets funded. It means we submit it gets evaluated or scored, and then and then if it scores high enough, then it gets funded. But even then, if we were going to construct a sidewalk on a city road, the town still has to come to the table with 20%. So there's still a cost to the city of New Bern, and so that's why planning for it is where we need to start, so that the city doesn't have to pay 100% of some of these costs.
And I can address a little bit. This New Bern plan has some, addresses some of your concerns specifically in Greenbrier. So what I would recommend is, are these available?
Yeah.
One more?
Yeah, go ahead.
So what I would recommend is taking a look at that plan,
Page 49.
page 49 and 50 is where it specifically addresses Greenbrier and some of the green space that's there, also Greenbrier Parkway and basically the path that runs behind Pine Valley, and it would be a shared path between the two developments, between Greenbrier and the development that's going to be behind you, the warehouse. And so, yes. So what I'm saying is, take a look at that plan. There is, and I really want to address all the comments that you folks made tonight. A lot of that has already been incorporated in the New Bern plan. The purpose of this committee really is to make sure that this plan just doesn't go on the shelf and nothing happens for the next 20 years.
Are you talking about this new development behind Greenbrier? Are you talking about where the school is or something?
No, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the Weyerhaeuser area. You know, just take a look at the plan. There's some things in there.
Okay.
But the purpose of this committee was to keep the pressure on the city of New Bern, and I told you this last meeting, is to keep the pressure on the city of New Bern, keep the pressure on the MPO, keep the pressure on NCDOT to create and retrofit New Bern with the sidewalks and bikeways that we need to get implemented. So I basically wanted to let you know that we're not ignoring your comments that you made tonight. All of your comments really have already been addressed in the plan. But as was stated by Bill and Mac, this plan is very comprehensive. And so really the purpose of the committee too was to figure out how to prioritize and how to get it funded. And so, and then to hold us accountable. So that's what I really wanted to address. Yes, and that'll get us started.
All right, thank you.
And so that's why, you know, in going through this agenda here, we haven't ignored you. It's
I didn't
already
feel
kind of,
ignored.
okay, good.
Thank you.
and sorry, Deanna,
No,
for
you're-
kind of taking over, but, take a look at the plan
Okay.
and give us feedback on the plan. And then our prioritization as well.
If you look at that map and it says something like Greenway, or it says some kind of multi-use plan, if you go in front of the plan, you will see diagrams for specifically what they're talking about, like a road, a buffer zone, a path, then a zone past that, so on and so forth.
It tells you exactly what each one of those looks like.
I want it back.
Thank you, Deanna.
No, these are all great questions. Okay, so one of the things that we heard from the last meeting was the Emerald Isle Trail. And so Felicia and I called, and we spoke with their recreation director. Now, while she wasn't there when this started, she was able to provide some background on the project itself. Excuse me. So this Emerald Isle Trail was a vision of one of their past recreation and parks director. And the goal from the very beginning was to construct a multi-use path from one end of the island to the next. So that's quite a lot, so they focused on the first 6 miles. And they were able to get a grant from NCDOT, I believe, or maybe it was Federal Highway, but and that grant required, it was an 80-20 split, which means it's 80% funded by the federal government and 20% was the local match. So in that first 6 miles, that local share was from the town. So Emerald Isle put up that 20%. So they still had the goal of constructing, I think it was the next 7 miles. And so with that, since they had so much success on the first section of the trail, the remaining sections, it was great because they were able to get either more grants for the majority of those costs. The town actually decided to approve a 1-cent tax increase that began in 2012. And then with that, they were also able to start having an annual marathon. And with that, they decided, the board decided that half of the revenue received from that marathon every year would go back into trail maintenance or new trail connections. And so with that, she estimated about $20,000 to $40,000 a year is reinvested back into the trail. And then they also relied heavily on community donors. They actually have a donor wall of people like Friends of the Trail who came and helped support the trail and the vision. And so she alluded earlier about the benefits of a trail. Well, obviously they had an outpouring of community support. It was something that was definitely needed. But with that, they have events that draw over 7,000 people annually to Emerald Isle. And so you can imagine the economic impact that has. They were also able to create some wayfinding signage. They do have a pedestrian and bicycle safety campaign and awareness. They do struggle with that a little bit during the summer just because you have an influx of people. They actually have e-scooters and e-bikes, so they're trying to figure out how to get that safety awareness out and trying to discourage them from being on the trail. But like I said, it's a great investment that they made in their community with a huge impact. So ultimately, they're having much success with their trail. I think in their case, as George mentioned to me earlier, that they had an existing right-of-way which was already pretty wide, so that tends to be a hindrance sometimes to having a trail. And they also had a pretty much straight path. So it was much easier to construct that multi-use trail just in, the topography, etc. But we wanted to report back just because that wasn't something that was brought up at the first meeting, and just to kind of make everyone aware of the possibilities of what one can do when you have community support for a project. Yes, sir.
One of the things that was brought up and you mentioned, and I don't know whether the city of New Bern would do it, is the 1% added to the tax to raise revenue.
I saw that. I remember you brought it up. See, and that's, and honestly, and I think I told you this last time too, the purpose really of this committee as well is to figure this out. How to pay for it. I mean, Deanna incredibly experienced on, NCDOT and federal grants and DOT grants and stuff like that. But as you can see, if you go back to the previous slide, they had some creative ways to pay for it locally as well. And I think, Trent Woods is going through some of that. Some of that's grant, some of that's not. I don't know if they had right-of-way issues or not, but that's for us to try and put together a recommendation of how to fund it for the Board of Aldermen to approve as well.
There used to be a fund around here that Rex Willis headed up with the chairman of the group. Community Foundation, maybe? You're not gonna get a lot of them.
I remember someone brought that up in one of my meetings, but I know what you're talking about. I don't know what it's called.
You're not gonna get $20,000, $30,000 out of them, probably. But some signage, for several $1,000s. I want to call it a community.
Yeah.
Here, somebody call Rex Willis now.
Now, I know what you're talking about because we had a meeting. I just can't recall the specific name. We will look into it and report back.
I'm going to send out a couple emails to somebody I know that's been successful at raising money and see if they have any suggestions.
And that's my point as well, to the public that's here. If the public is willing to have an outcry to, hey, we're going to pay for this with an increase. Now that was property taxes. I think your recommendation was actually sales tax.
That's what I thought. I thought it was sales tax.
And so, those we can do too, but, the public's got to be behind us on that, in order to do that.
I mean, perhaps a nonprofit like Pedaling for Parkinson's
I'll
teams
just
up with
say
Slice
that one
Bike
person in the
Shop.
room.
We can raise $20,000 in a day
There you
easily,
go. Thank you.
easily.
But anyway, that's,
So at the last meeting, you asked us to look through this and decide what was important to us. So I have some areas that are important to us. So if everyone has their own certain areas, maybe we could kind of break off and concentrate on everyone in the committee in their certain areas, and then get some help, guidance from you as to the steps that we would have to take. I'm just kind of brainstorming here about how to move forward.
I think it's great. I mean, I saw the last meeting and this meeting as more of an education, and so we stand ready to help. That's kind of what our roles for staff is. We're seeking your guidance, and you want us to look into something, and that's what we'll start looking into, or helping you figure out next steps. So,
Yeah. So for example, I live on Noose Boulevard.
I'm sorry, where?
I live on Noose Boulevard. And you didn't seem to walk up to Bosch. You already started at Racetrack.
We did.
And I live between Racetrack and Bosch.
Yep.
And so if you're writing some type of report of what you found, I'm a good resource for that, because there's accidents in front of my house all the time. And I cannot leave my driveway to get downtown on a bike. I have to put it in my car and go to a safe spot, and then get off my bike and ride. So that's a concern of mine. So if you're writing a report, I'd like to give you my thoughts on that when you draft whatever it is you think you might be able to offer NCDOT as some recommendations to fix that road. Another area that I'm concerned about is Oaks Road. So looking at these plans, it's hard for me to just figure out exactly what Oaks Road was what you were looking at in the plan with Oaks Road. Were you looking at a bike lane? I know there's a lot of...
I think it was a multi-use path.
Was there a multi-use path on that one? So is Oaks Road Newbern or NCDOT?
That's right, neighbor.
It's Newbern? Okay.
And
this is the-
See, right here, it says
This is for the-
shared use.
Okay, oh, yes,
Yes.
great, super.
Probably,
But
probably down.
where the problem comes in is, see this little creek over here?
Yeah,
You can't get, you just so
Oh,
far
right.
on the road there.
oh, yes,
And
yeah.
that's where the environmental impact comes in.
Yeah.
And
There's a lot of jurisdictional wetlands to either side of Oaks Road.
Right,
Um,
I guess that's why
Some
I
real
was
thought
thinking,
needs to be put into how that would be
Yeah.
achieved, either going down there or choosing an alternate path. But at some point, you've got to cross Remy's Creek
right. Because right now, I get off in Martin Marietta
and Jack Smith
And-
Creek too.
and
Right.
unload my bike and then go down Oaks.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we've had lots of conversation about, because we actually have sidewalk now, you can actually walk from Lawson Creek all the way around till you get to the International at Noose Avenue, right there at Ballfield. And then now the next goal is how do we get people from there to Martin Marietta?
Yeah, right.
And you get into some difficult areas where you have never right of way. You've got highly sensitive environmental areas that you're going to have to cross at some point. So just a difficult spot.
can you say,
Has there ever been any thought of doing like in Raleigh area, the News River Trail, follow our News River around? And that's a lot of, as houses along there have been washed out, flooded so many times, is the state ever going to buy them out or anything, or is the insurance going to buy them out, would you use that land?
There are not too many buyouts right on the water.
They're not,
No, they seem to get built back.
yeah, no,
so when
we
they,
pay for it.
when they say a neighborhood greenway, what are you talking about there?
So the neighborhood greenway is not much. And the plan defines it as basically more signage than anything on the road itself.
Okay.
Let me see, because they, back to here. It's on page 36.
36?
So 36 is really more of you're doing what's called the share row. So instead of having a dedicated bike lane, it's a bicycle with two arrows, and it's just basically to explain to your motorist that you're sharing the road, but you don't have a dedicated lane. And then you have more of signage saying that your greenways, go this way to connect to this neighborhood, etc.
Doesn't the Sharrow mean that the cyclist can take the whole entire lane?
If you are a cyclist, you are a vehicle and you have the whole lane.
Yes.
And so that goes back to the safety pedestrian campaign. I mean, that's something we can certainly, as the MPO, we can work on. And that's more about education and awareness. But yeah, a lot of people don't realize that as a cyclist, you are considered a vehicle and you have the whole lane.
What, may I ask a question? I can't remember what year that was passed, 15, 14, but I've yet to see a North Carolina sign saying 4 feet for cyclists.
For motorists,
Okay.
that allowing cyclists a certain buffer.
Oh, the buffer.
Yeah.
If you look at the law,
4 feet, it's the law, is the sticker.
what it says is that, and it's a note over to the side, that a bicycle needs 4 feet to operate in. Okay? So that established 4 feet. The bicycle is going to be in the middle, which leaves 2 feet. And then the state of North Carolina NCDOT law says that when you pass somebody, you got to pass them by at least 2 feet. So you got the bicycle, I call it the wobble path, and the extra 2 feet, and that's where the 4 feet come in. I have seen signs that appeared to be DOT signs that did say 4 feet, but they were not fixed signs. They fold out portable signs that Cycle North Carolina and a lot of other people have used. So I'm like, was it Ben, you said that? It would be nice to actually see that in writing other than an interpretation like I just gave you.
So to pass a bicyclist, can you go across a double yellow line?
Yes.
Yes.
Since October of 15.
What was that? I'm sorry.
You can go across the double yellow line to pass cyclists. But
In a vehicle, you mean?
Yeah, vehicle.
Okay, okay.
Yes.
There's
There's
plenty
also,
of cars that won't, they'll stay behind you because they are not aware that they
Yeah,
can do that.
education, big
Okay.
thing,
Yeah.
yeah.
and of course, there is certain liability comes with that, and that is you're still responsible if an accident occurs. But it also frees up, you know, I'm out there on Susquehanna Road, and not a car within 6 miles of me, and there's a double yellow line. You know. So that gives them the right to pass, which I think it was a good law. It would.
So that's something that Felicia and I can work on. We can help create a safety campaign. Wilmington has a really good one that I really like. Jacksonville was getting ready to implement one. And so that's something that we can kind of start working on the framework and then bring it back to the committee for some tweaking and changes, et cetera.
One other comment about the neighborhood greenway to the people over here. From the comments that was made, Pine Valley section on this map shows a greenway. Maybe somebody in your neighborhood should see if they can put together a group. There would be a real advocacy to have that changed to a multi-use or bicycle.
I wanted to ask a question about that because my concern about right-of-way to vehicles and cars, but when children are riding bicycles, that's my biggest concern. I've seen a child, and I've seen it on Greenbrier Parkway. Here a couple of weeks ago, a woman was holding a phone in her hand, and the kids were riding their bicycle, and they were off the road, and she ran right across the white line and almost hit the kids. And that's what gets me worried out there about not having signs out there saying, hey, you know, be alert, there's kids, when you see kids out there.
Well, it goes back to a lot of distracted drivers too, and if they're not going to obey speed limits and the general rules of the road, they're not going to pay attention to these signs. That's a problem. Just twice this week, I was on Glen Burnie Road, down by Spunky McDoodle's. There was a major accident, and then the very next day, up by the food line, and it appeared to be because I came upon them, I guess, obviously after it happened, but neither of them. I mean, both of them looked like they involved each 2 cars. None of the cars drove away in either of the 2 accidents. They were all towed. And so, they just changed the speed limit on that one section of Glen Burnie down to 35. That worked fine for a week or 2, but very few honor that new speed limit.
People still go faster than that.
Oh, absolutely.
Do you have something?
I had another area, was the crosswalk that goes over to Union Point, from east front to south, is 4 seconds long. And I'm a very active person, and I can't cross it in time.
So it's where is it at again?
It's east front and south front, that intersection right there.
Union Point Park.
And you're crossing, to go over to the
Okay.
park.
4 seconds.
It's not the one
You
that,
got it?
it's not the one on the other side.
I'll have technicians.
Yeah. Also, when you push the button, it seems to prefer to make sure all the cars can do what they want to do before we do what we want to do, crossing, walking. So it'll let a tremendous amount of cars go by, and so the people don't wait because they're like, oh, it's broken. And I know it's not because I use it 3 times a day. So I know it's not broken, but I see all these people just taking these chances because it takes so long for that light to change.
Does it have the second countdown?
It's 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. That's the countdown.
It's also confusing which button to push.
Yeah. I always figured it was just there for looks. Your butt, yeah, punch it, not punch it, about 15 times.
So I'm taking it that you're gonna George, you're gonna deal with that, and I'm not gonna have to go to the next step, right? Like, I'm gonna email you or call you or something, so I can go do the noose thing and the Oaks thing, and just get one thing going
Yep.
on those.
Yep.
Yeah, we
And
have,
I'll
you know,
just
we'll
let
have
that one go
technicians
there.
check
Yeah, I
it.
figured that would be.
A lot of times that when you get a power blink in them, you know, that they do have computer modules in them, sometimes it upsets the timing. So.
Thank you.
Well, then that being said, sometimes we don't know.
Oh,
And
sure.
so
Oh, I'm
letting
not
us
upset
know
about it. I
allows
figured-
us to
yeah.
actually go take a
We just
look.
need to tell someone, yeah.
Yeah, we prefer
Yeah.
people not to just decide to go because they waited long.
Right, yeah.
All right, so we've heard
Those are
from
my
Ms.
grades,
Davidson. We've heard a little bit from Mr. Sadler. Gentlemen, do you have
Real
any?
quickly, and Mac sort of mentioned it to me, so I'm going to steal his thunder maybe, but I want us to have a concentrated effort on working with the surrounding communities. I realize that the city of Newburgh can only do so much, but as an MPO, you know, you can be that connecting rod. Now, so,
I would also like to know, because I live in a neighborhood district downtown, and I've heard the chief of police speak on traffic issues. He kind of left the conversation where we really can't enforce the speeding laws. You know, we can calm traffic, we can put some deterrence in, but it's very difficult to write a ticket on, I'll take East Front Street, when the speed limit is 25, they won't really write one till it's 35. Well, if a car is going 35 miles an hour on East Front Street, they are reckless. They're bouncing off cars and trees and things. So having said that, it'd be nice to know what their position would be with bicycle safety. Do they intend to enforce any bicycle laws, interaction with automobiles or vehicles, or what their position is on all
And
this?
I think we can incorporate that with the education and safety campaign.
Yeah.
So one of the things that most of these are modeled after what's called the NC Watch for Me. And part of that education is not only educating the public, but it's having that relationship and that partnership with the police department. And so it's not always giving them, you know, it's the willingness to educate, maybe not necessarily through a ticket, but also maybe rewarding someone who is doing wonderful by abiding by the rules.
Right.
So, but we can definitely engage the police department as part of that safety campaign. And my goal is, since our next meeting is not until January, is my goal, might be a little lofty, is to have just either a simple framework or maybe bring some examples of other safety campaigns to see what you like and what you don't like. And by certainly email us with your ideas if you find something that you really like. You know, let us know so we can incorporate that.
I do have one thing I want to ask. On Broad Street, East Boulevard, where they've got the bike lane going down, you can park in, I call it a left door lane is all that is. We had one of our cyclists get hurt really, really bad just from that. So I opened up a car door in front. Is there any way we can get around anything like that? I hate to see those who put in play left door lanes.
I mentioned that one time, and I was told that it didn't meet the qualifications as a bike lane, maybe because it's width or
Yeah.
something. But my contention, I think Mac's contention as well, now I'm sorry, I'm stealing your thunder. At least, go ahead and put a bicycle chevron in there, at least tell them, it's not so much for the cyclist as it is for the person parking a car.
Yeah.
That the bicycle may be coming along here. The other thing is, in your ringway, put the big chevron in the middle of the road would help as well.
Well, I never understood why they had any parking spaces along there anyway. Very few cars park on East Boulevard, on Broad Street. down the road.
Certain areas.
I know nobody knows what the chevrons even mean, especially drivers. They're very uneducated and they don't know what any bicycle symbols in the roads mean.
Well, but the thing about it is, at least there is a bicycle symbol in the middle of the road.
Yeah. And they can see that, but they don't know what the chevrons mean on there.
All right, so I've heard this evening, we're definitely in favor of a safety campaign, so we've got some work cut out for that. And I've heard some areas where we're interested in seeing something. We're going to look at the DOT law about the 4-foot buffer. You guys wanted to see that in writing. And then if it is, but maybe looking at the possibility of signage. Did I hear that correctly?
One more thing. Get me on a roll here. Something that can be done now that don't cost anything is the fact that on Trent Road, our, 3/4 mile bike lane we've got down there, even coming down here tonight, I looked, piles of yard debris in the lane, trash cans in the lane, and people sweeping their, all of his leaves in his yard went right into the lane from his whole length of his house. Go along on a bicycle, you swerve right in the middle of traffic. So,
That's my biggest pet peeve is seeing a trash can in
Yeah.
the middle of the bike lane.
and seeing there's always when a car get ready to pass you, you come up on that thing.
You wouldn't put things in the driving lane,
No.
so why
They
put
don't,
it in
that's
the
part of
bike
the
lane?
education, again, they don't know they're not supposed to put the stuff there.
Well, and we did actually last year put out a thing through Colleen or others that try and prevent that, and you bring it up as a bicyclist issue, but we also see that as a hindrance to our drainage systems.
Yeah,
When
yeah.
they put
Okay.
their loose leaf in the gutter line, same with the trash cans. Rain events, it blocks the drainage.
How about fines? Give a fine one time, they won't do it anymore.
Maybe.
Maybe.
So, one other question. So when somebody looks at something like this, and I'm speaking to this lady right here, this area right here, you want to make sure that happens. Because this is Pine Valley. And do we know on the 43 extension when? Any ideas? My question really is, if I see something like this, do I call you? Do I call DOT? How
No,
do I
you can call us.
call
So
you?
on the NC43 connector, they are finalizing design now, which, and it'll go out for advertisement for probably middle of next year. But they're really excited to get started. Now, I will have to let everyone know, when the design of NC43 started 10 years ago, so in my world, things don't happen fast. So short term for us is 5 to 10 years. So you think about when you identify a project and then it has to get funded and then design and construction, that literally can be 5 to 10 years. So when NC43 extension was being designed, Complete Streets was not a thing. So as much as we would like that connection because it's a straight point, that's not something that's part of the design of what DOT is going to construct. They're too far gone in the design, they can't stop and design all of that now. That being said, there might be an opportunity in the future for us to retrofit some type of pedestrian accommodation. So that facility is called controlled access. So think of it like US 70. That controlled access meaning that you only have certain points of entrance and that they don't allow by law, I guess, that you can ride a bike down that corridor. But the right-of-way is wide enough that we might be able to come in at a future date and either put in like a multi-use path or something along those lines. But it will not be constructed with the extension.
I was just looking at the symbol says, I don't have my glasses on, a multi-use path. Shared use path.
And for the record, I did ask, but no, it was too far gone. And it made it a little more complicated too, because it's technically in the county still, parts of it is being annexed into the city, and so who pays that 20% that we've required, and that's a several $1 million worth of trail. So that all goes back to if we plan for it, and then we have some type of revenue to figure out how to fund that 20% when projects come up, that the funding's already there, that we can move forward with that particular grant or project.
That would be a great asset to that community and future communities.
Yes.
To have that place where you could go running, you could go take a nice long walk. It would be nice.
I'm just hoping I'll be around to see some of this. In 2006, when this first started, I was a young man.
Yes, you are.
Yeah.
So the biggest action item that I heard is from, at least from staff, is really to start working on a safety campaign. Does the committee have anything else that you would like us to work on other than the few items?
What's your thoughts on safety campaign?
To develop a safety campaign. So we're going to work on kind of a framework and some ideas. We'll have some examples of other safety campaigns, and then we'll report back in January with some examples and a framework, very loose, to seek your input.
Just like everything else, once you say it over and over and over and over again, it finally gets in somebody's brain. And that's what it's going to take. You can see that in TV now. It's got to be said over and over and over again. Then you believe it.
So do you mind if I email you just with some
Of course, no, go right ahead.
specifics?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And so last meeting, we talked about that we were generally going to meet the first Monday of every other month. And so I have a proposed schedule of our meetings for next calendar year. So our next meeting would be January 8th.
Deanna, is your email address nba.org?
I think that's our generic one, but if you wait after the meeting, I'll give you my card.
Okay.
And then it has my email.
All right.
I was just saying, I think September 2nd is Labor Day.
You didn't want to meet then? I mean, I'm gung ho, let's do this.
It's a long ways out, Cody.
Okay. All right, is there any other business that the committee would like to discuss? All right, I look for a motion to dismiss.
Move.
Second? All in favor?